Welcome back to r/NeighborsFromHell, where people share stories about their crazy neighbors, and if you're new to my channel, please don't forget to subscribe to join our amazing community, and without any further ado, let's dive right into the stories. The first one is titled Crazy Nail Neighbor. For the last year, tension has been building up between my neighbor and I over our shared driveway. I am aware that most people don't share a driveway with their neighbors, so let me explain. My husband and I live in a beautiful neighborhood, but the layout of our houses is odd. With the way our houses sit, there is one big driveway that sits between the two houses. Part of the driveway turns left in front of my neighbor's house, and that is considered their part of the driveway. The rest of the driveway runs down the path to our house. While we do not actually share the driveway to park our cars, when my husband and I back out of our driveway, we have to use the neighbor's part of the driveway to maneuver our cars out. Our house sits slightly behind theirs, so in order to fully back out of the shared driveway, we have to slightly turn into theirs and back out. While this is not the most ideal situation, I honestly would not mind if my neighbors were not such a-holes about it. See, at first we had come to an agreement that we could use that part of their driveway to back out, but not to park. This was totally understandable as they had their own cars to park. However, my husband and I always honored this agreement over the course of the past year. Our neighbors have been doing this in order to prevent us from using that part of the driveway. I would like to mention that while our neighbors were not the most neighborly, they were also never rude to us before this. I had no idea where this sudden feud was coming from, but boy, did they start off strong. The first instance occurred when they had put traffic cones in their part of the driveway, blocking it so that we would not be able to use it to move our cars. I figured they were getting tired of us turning into their driveway in order to back out, but this is something that we had agreed on, so I was not entirely too sure why it would be a problem all of a sudden. Nonetheless, I did my best to maneuver around the cones very carefully in order to back out. The next instance that happened was a couple weeks later. When my husband was getting ready to leave for work one morning, he was shocked to find a giant lacrosse net placed on that part of the driveway. It was impossible to my husband to turn his car around and back out of the driveway, so we had to move it so that he could back out. We moved the net back just in case, but I'm assuming that they were not incredibly happy about this. This cycle continued of them putting various objects in that part of the driveway. I actually had my husband install a security camera because every time they would put an object in the driveway, it was more ridiculous than the last one. I was starting to become afraid of what the next object would be. My husband, who is much more confrontational than I am, had actually went over to their house one day and asked them to stop putting the objects there because it was getting harder and harder to back out. The wife had told my husband that they had no problem with us using their part of the driveway to back out at first, but now we were taking advantage of them and pulling way farther into their driveway than we were supposed to. I was honestly confused because 1, we were not driving any differently than we had been previously, and 2, even if we were pulling into their driveway, we were just using it to turn our car around, and we were not parking our cars there or taking advantage of them like they claimed. My husband insisted that this was just a childish feud brought on by the neighbors and that we did not need a security camera. However, I was adamant about getting one just in case. We have never even expected to have problems with them in the first place, so who was to say that this would not keep escalating? Well, it was a good thing we did get a security camera because it ended up helping us in the long run. See, one weekend I was getting ready to go shopping with my daughter, and I was surprised that there were no cones or other objects preventing us from backing out. When I started turning my car into their part of the driveway to back out, however, I heard a loud popping sound. The neighbors had placed a piece of wood with nails sticking out, knowing that we were going to be turning our cars in that specific part of the driveway. I immediately called the police. My daughter was so shaken up about the incident, and I could not help but think, if I don't stop this now, it will go even further the next time. We were able to provide security camera footage which caught both the husband and wife putting the boards down. This eventually ended up with us getting a lawyer and taking them to court. In the meantime, my husband and I parked our cars on our back lawn in order to prevent any other issues while the investigation and court dates were happening. In court, the couple had told the judge the same thing they had told my husband several months prior, that we were taking advantage of them and driving way further up than we needed to. Well, our security camera footage proved otherwise and the judge favored on our side. In the end, our neighbors ended up with a second-degree harassment charge and spent 30 days in the county jail. On top of this, they also had to pay for the damage the nails had caused my car tires. Note to myself, don't trust your neighbors even if they seem nice at first. And Ripe Stars, I'm curious, have you ever had to deal with neighbors that seemed super nice at first but turned out to be monumental douchebags in the long run? If you have any interesting stories to share, in particular about neighbors like that, then please feel free to post them either in the comments or on r/ripestories on Reddit, which is our own personal subreddit. Thank you so much in advance, and by the way, if you could also post some star emojis in the comments to support my channel, that would make me extremely happy. Thank you so much in advance. The next one is titled, I'm Not Your Meal Ticket. Well, this story starts out like quite a few others have, me being in the US Army become attracted to a woman whom I end up marrying. At first she is all I could ever ask for in a woman. Sweet, caring, and one hell of a cuddler. Does not really like video games like I do, but makes an effort to get into them so we can spend time together doing something we both enjoy. Let's call her Thunder Cow or TC for short, for reasons you will know soon. I met TC through one of the other soldiers I worked with, who we will call BB, Battle Buddy, since he was not at fault in this. It was in the middle of the week and I had just gotten a work order finished up and was taking a quick break for a drink of water. I heard BB asking a few other soldiers if they were open for a date for this coming weekend. Now, I knew from a few other friends that BB was straight, so I was curious as to why he was asking. Long story short, BB had a female friend who was looking for a date for a movie that coming weekend. I offered to go with his friend, big mistake, and she and I hit it off rather well and continued to see each other. Months pass, it hasn't been enough time for me to consider marriage yet, but she has some spontaneous ailments like seizures, and they were legit spring up out of nowhere. Since these only seemed to happen in her sleep and my command wouldn't let me stay off post with her without being married, light bulb, we got a courtroom wedding 2 weeks later. The added bonus, not only could I stay with her while she slept to be ready in case of another episode, but my TRICARE would fully cover her medical costs. I was happy, she was happy, and I got to tell my command, now you cannot stop me from staying with her. And we all lived happily ever after. Except we didn't. Things went well for a while, as I described at the beginning of the post, but after a bit I started noticing things. Things like her needing to take her mother to the doctor's office quite frequently, her mother was sickly so I didn't think much of it at first, or needing to head to the Walmart one town over because the one in our town did not have what she needed in stock. Things like the car I bought and let her use seen parked in a lot next to several different trailer parks in a month. Well, as luck would have it, right as I started to get suspicious, I came down on orders to PCS to Korea. So sidelining the investigation until I was able to continue, I packed, kissed my wife goodbye and let the army send me where they wanted me. I spent a year in Korea and then came down on orders for Texas. I went there, it was there that I found out exactly what was going on, courtesy of her mom, brother and her aunt and uncle. This woman was sleeping with 60, not even kidding in the slightest, different men, most of them soldiers. Her excuse to her family was, OP is gay and doesn't want to come out, so he's pointing out the men I can sleep with since he knows that they are clean. So basically, this woman is using me as a paycheck and meal ticket and screwing everything with a pulse that happens to be male. The icing on the cake is that 2 weeks after I get the good news, she calls me and confesses to cheating on me once. The only reason she confessed, she was pregnant and there was no way I could be the father, given that I was in a different state at the time and the father was African American. I am very much not African American, having been called neon white on more than one occasion due to my Irish ancestry. So there was no possible way this child would look like me at all. So my wife felt the need to break the news to me before she had the baby, because she could no longer hide it. Well, things happened. I went back home without her knowing and removed my belongings from the house I bought to keep her from selling them once she realized what I was about to do and started divorce proceedings. This is revenge number 1. I saw her boyfriend, not the baby's father, new guy entirely, driving my car. So I enlisted the help of her aunt and uncle to get my car back. They pulled up behind him in a parking lot, got out and talked to him normally, at which time I woke up from the other side of the parking lot. Her uncle asked to see the keys and upon receiving them began taking the car key off of the ring and waved me forward. I walked up, took the car key from him, looked at the guy and said, "Hi, my name's OP and this is my car. I'm taking it now." I waved him over to the sidewalk, removed everything from the car that didn't have my name on it, left the items with him and then got in my car and drove off. I found out later that day that he had packed everything and left her. Apparently he had been living in my house, eating my food, sleeping in my bed and wearing my clothes. Plus she had been using the money I sent her every month to pay for his court costs and child support costs. Well, months went by, our court date came up and my lawyer recommended that I file for sole use of the vehicle and the property, since it was obvious that she had committed adultery and didn't have a leg to stand on. We go to court, she counterfiles for the exact same, and since she refused to release the results of a paternity test, I get stonewalled. The exact words used by the judge were, "I'm sorry, but without proof of paternity of the child, I cannot in good conscience approve either of these motions." So we set a new date for a private hearing with the judge and we wait. Nearly 3 months go by and the court date was finally near. I walked into the courthouse, met up with my lawyer, who had a demonic glint in his eye at the time, and I was about to find out why. Then went into the courtroom and waited. 20 minutes later she walked in, shot me a dirty look, which I did my best to ignore, and sat down. The judge came in 5 minutes later, the court was called to order and the divorce trial commenced. Here I found out just what had given my lawyer the twinkle in his eye earlier on. He proceeded to ask TC a series of questions including: "Is my client the father of your child? When was the child conceived? Where was my client during the time at which your child was conceived? Do you know who the father of your child is? Have you received child support from the father of your child?" Basically, he questioned her into a legal corner in which she either had to answer truthfully or lie and suffer the legal ramifications of perjury in the face of easily provable evidence. She answered truthfully, lucky for her, and the court case continued. She presented her argument littered with dirt she was trying to throw on me, insults to my person, questions about my sexual orientation, and claims that I was having a relationship with her 18-year-old cousin. I, falling back on my military training, simply sat up straight, folded my hands in front of me on the table, and stared at a spot on the wall slightly above the judge's left shoulder. I answered every question asked of me, offered no personal opinions, threw no dirt, and refused to sink to her level and question her sexuality. Subsequently, she had a more and more confused look on her face as I refrained from bad-mouthing her like she was doing me, and the divorce trial went by rather fast. At the conclusion of the trial, the judge looked over the paperwork submitted one last time, then looked to the both of us and asked, "Are there any closing remarks or claims that need to be made?" TC, my wife, aka ex-wife, made one last parting swipe about me currently living with her aunt and uncle. I had rented my own apartment months ago after finishing my military time and going back home, and I merely shook my head and resumed staring at the wall. The judge took one last look over the papers, set them down, and spoke the greatest words I've ever heard in my life. Well, looking over the evidence and testimonies presented, there really is only one decision I can come to. OP, I am approving your motions for exclusive use of the vehicle and property upon undeniable evidence of adultery. Mrs. OP, the only one of your motions I am granting today is your request for a no-contact order, and that is more for Mr. OP's benefit than your own. You seemed very combative and willing to cause him legal damage that he was not due, and your repeated attempts to overtalk me while I was reviewing the paperwork did not speak well of you. You will no longer have a claim to either the property or the vehicle, and will not contact Mr. OP unless it is to have him clarify which items don't belong to you. TC had the audacity to work up a sniffle and ask the judge, But where do I go? What do I do for a place to live? The judge looked back at her and replied, Well, Mrs. OP, you have 30 days to figure that out. After which you will not set foot on that property again, or else you will be held in contempt of court. And Ripe stars obviously, as Reddit story veterans we know, you better not mess with a soldier. And in this case, it was true once again. Honestly guys, in my opinion, that is one of the most despicable things you can do, to cheat on your fiancé, especially when he or she is a soldier while being away from you. And by the way, Ripe stars, I would just like to remind you once again, if you have especially any interesting neighbor stories to share, please feel free to post them on r/Ripe Stories on Reddit, which is our own subreddit. If you are curious on how to register on Reddit, because you have to register in order to post, you can essentially just input any email, it does not even have to be a valid one, and then just any password. Afterwards, you can just start posting on r/Ripe Stories if you want. And the next one is titled, Petty Revenge Never Felt More Satisfying. This revenge happened a few years ago, but I was reminded of it today and thought I would share it with you wonderful people. I was in my very early 20s and working at a retail store and used to take my breaks away from the store for multiple reasons. On this day, I decided to eat at the lake, which is 100% public property throughout the park. I bought a wrap from a nearby store and drove to the lake. I sat down at the picnic tables that were nearby a French fry truck. While I was eating my wrap, some a-hole seagull got very bold and dive-bombed my wrap while it was sitting in front of me on the table. As this made a mess, I went and asked the chip truck guy if I could have a couple napkins, and he exclaimed that they were for chip truck customers only. I explained that I'm a customer, just not today, and that his attitude will only make me not ever want to eat there in the future again. He gave me a stupid look and didn't say anything, so I went back to the table and cleaned up the mess the best I could. As I was walking back to my car, I went to place the garbage in the bin near his chip truck. He literally came out of the truck and yelled at me, saying the garbage can is for customers only and the picnic tables, public property, were also for his customers only. Now, there must have been 25 seagulls lurking around me in hopes of getting their beak wet with my tasty wrap. So I went back to the picnic tables which he claimed were his and threw the remnants of my wrap up in the air so that crap went everywhere. The seagulls went crazy and him and his little want of a girlfriend came running out of the truck, following me as I walked to my car and took pictures of my license plate. At this point, I thought my petty revenge was over and I was pleased with the result, as I'm sure I had inconvenienced them more than they had me, but 2 days later a cop shows up at my door saying that they received a complaint that I was vandalizing public property. I explained to the cop what had happened and he told me that I shouldn't have done what I did, but that the chip truck is not allowed to claim public property as their own, and the next time I went to the lake there was no more chip truck. And the next one is titled, Cranky Old A-Hole and the Fence He Had to Pay Twice For. One of my former jobs was at a glass installation place. It was a warehouse that contained a small office and a shop/storage area for the crews. Running along the side of the warehouse was a 12 feet wide grassy area, still our property, and then alongside next to that was a driveway for a small storage facility, about 8 spaces owned by somebody else. We were tight on parking, so the owner would use the driveway behind us to access our grassy area. Well, one day this old-timer came into our lobby, asked for the owner, and then told him he didn't want him using the driveway to access his parking spot on our own property. Now, mind you, my boss never blocked anybody, and also sometimes renters would come over to us and ask to use our restroom, which we always let them. Sometimes they would even temporarily park on our grass strip while they unloaded, and we never made a stink about that. Well, Mr. Cranky was having none of it. My boss even asked him nicely and got shut down. So, to be a dick, Mr. Cranky decided to have a chain link fence installed right where our grassy area meets his driveway, so a crew comes out and started driving posts into the ground. Well, where they were driving the posts was on our property. I went and alerted the boss. He went and had a look and then said, "I'm going to wait until they are done first." When they finished the post and were getting ready to add the chain link part, the boss went out, told them to stop, and then explained that they were on our property while he had a copy of the property survey for proof. The old man was there, tried to take a look at the survey. My boss snatched it away from him and said, "Get your own survey." So Mr. Cranky had to pay extra for a surveyor to come out, at least $400, only to find out that his new fence was on our property. Then he had to pay to have the new fence removed and then have holes drilled in his asphalt driveway for the posts and then pay for labor all over again to get his fence reinstalled. Between the survey and having to pay for dismantling and reinstalling his new fence, I am sure he was out a few bucks. Take that, you old fart. And ripe stars, with this we have reached the end of the video. However, if you still cannot get enough of my content, then I would highly suggest to check out my endless binge watch playlist, which will soon show up in the left corner of the screen. In addition, I would really appreciate it if you could not only subscribe to the channel, but also turn on the bell notifications, which you can do by clicking on the little bell icon right next to the subscribe button. This will help my channel tremendously, and this will make sure that you don't miss any of my videos. Furthermore, if you want to see additional ripe content that I don't post on YouTube, then I would suggest to head on over to patreon.com/ripeyoutube for more than 50 exclusive videos that you will not see anywhere else. Thank you so much for your amazing daily support, and I hope to see you again tomorrow.